country has.
That's right.
I want to connect this with Occupy, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, which will be marching to momentarily, looms in eerie silence just beyond the Chicago Board of Trade and in the face of the Federal Reserve Bank.
That's right.
This is emblematic of the omnipresent invisibility of the nearly 2.5 million men, women, and children locked down in the hellholes of America's historically unprecedented system of mass incarceration.
Talk about it.
And the millions more, mainly youth and people of color, who live under the threat of incarceration or with the stigma and discrimination of life branded as a criminal or felon. Wall Street and much of the financial district in Manhattan is literally built on the bones and bodies of slaves. And the first slave market in New York was built at the end of Wall Street. This system was founded on slavery and the extermination of the native peoples and the theft of their land. Prisons have been integral to enforcing the brutal inhumanity of this system, repressing whole sections of society, as well as groups and movements who have risen up and struggled for liberation. After the Civil War, slavery by another name was reimposed on black folks through a Jim Crow system of racist laws that had former slaves arrested for such crimes as vagrancy and forced to labor for corporations, and sometimes even forced back to the owners of the plantations from which they were just freed. When workers began to form unions and struggle against capitalist exploitation, the police and prison cells were waiting. When black folks in the South began to stand up in determined struggle to demand to be treated as human beings, the police were there with clubs and dogs and water hoses and jail cells. When broad sections of people rose up in the 1960s, the rulers of this system were profoundly shaken by the power of the people. And they unleashed wave after wave of repression, including assassinating and imprisoning leaders of the movement. And as we've seen in our time here, the coordinated national repression of the Occupy movement, which we must stand against. Recognizing and fearing the power of the people, the rulers of this system set out to prevent any liberating movement from developing again. And as they searched for ways to more profitably exploit people in other countries and took the factories and industrial jobs out of our cities, so began the explosion of mass incarceration and the new Jim Crow, with a constant and growing stream of primarily black and brown people ripped from their families and intentionally defunded communities into the prison tombs springing up across the prairies and plains of this country. Today we stand with thousands of people across the country in support of the bottom 1% of the 99%. Those people locked down in prisons and jails and immigration detention centers across this country. And we demand an end to this racist system of mass incarceration. So we're going to hear from a statement by Ken. You're going to read Mamiya's statement.
All right.
By Mamiya Abu-Jamal, a political prisoner who's been languishing in prison for over 30 years in this country.
When I heard the call, just raised in Oakland, California, to occupy the prisons, I gasped. It was especially not a radical call, but it was right on time. For prisons have become a metaphor, the shadow side, if you will, of America, with oceans of words about freedom and the reality that the U.S. is the world's leader in the incarceration industry. And Occupy, now an international movement, certainly has no shortage of prisons to choose from. Every state, every rural district, every hamlet in America has a prison, a place where the Constitution doesn't exist, and where slavery is all but legalized. And where there are prisons, there is torture, beatings, grave humiliation, perverse censorship, and even murders, all under the legal legal system that is as blind as the statue which holds aloft the scale, her eyes covered by a frigid fold of cloth. So what is Occupy to do? Initially, it must support movements, but the Occupy movement must do more. As it shifted the discussion and the paradigm on economic issues, it must turn the wheel to the so-called criminal justice system in America. And that is, in fact, a destructive and counterproductive annual $69 billion boondoggle of repression, better known by activists as the prison industrial complex. That means much more than a one-day event, no matter how massive or impressive. It means building a mass movement that demands and fights for real change, and eventually abolition of structures that do far more social damage than good. It means abolition of solitary confinement, for it is no more than modern-day torture chambers for the poor.
That's right.
It means the repeal of repressive laws that support such structures. It means social change, or it means nothing. So let us begin. Down with the